In part 1, we saw how South Africa followed the international example of austerity, affecting mostly the working class and the poor. In this part, we will look at the resistance against austerity, and we will explore alternative solutions that will make sure the working class gets what it deserves.
Every time a nurse resigns, every time a worker dies there, they are not replacing the workers. And yet we know that there are staff shortages that makes the load to increase on each and every worker that is providing the service that helped us to fight the coronavirus.
Corruption namhlanje. Whatever it is that you're doing, that you're stealing from the working class, stop it.
Kodwa bathulile basho lutho. Imali bayazidla bona aba-invest ukuthi zisebenzele umphakathi or iphakathi sisebenzele isizwe.
It is very clear that we are becoming successful in forging a society-wide anti-austerity movement, and that movement is rising.
We currently see that any system that puts profits before people, where maximum accumulation at all costs, right, becomes the order of the day, is a system that at some point is going to implode.
When you have the richest 10% controlling 90% of the wealth in this country, that for me is mind-blowing. And the fact that we don't have a wealth tax is actually indicative of just how much this government does not care.
Worldwide, viable alternatives to austerity measures include policies, taxes, and practices that enable growth through the redistribution of resources. Given the impact of COVID-19 on the country, there is widespread support for a wealth tax, and a recent study showed that by taxing only the wealthiest 1% at rates between 3 and 7%, the government could raise over 140 billion rand.
Those people who have high wealth and high income earn it because ultimately there's a real economy behind that, driving that, workers, people, right? And if those people are working and still living under the upper bound poverty line, what does that say about, one, how our business wages are structured, but two, how we redistribute and ensure that there's fairness in our economy and there's economic justice?
There have been many Marikanas. They happen all the time across the platinum belt and across the gold belt. And austerity is about disposability of African bodies and African lives, African health, African education. You can spend on anything else, but we are the ones who you can be completely cavalier about.
The current health and economic crisis is actually an opportunity for a just recovery, a recovery that elevates people out of poverty by increasing public spending and creating real and sustainable jobs.
I like the idea of employment guarantees, getting people economically active. That would be a huge investment within the people of South Africa to shift the economy forward, because even before the crisis, we were seeing declining rates of real investment in the economy.
Then we would be employing lots of people. They would then be providing revenue to the tax authorities, in which we could then pay back our debts, etc. So that's the logic.
In the financial crisis, there was a lot of saving of businesses. But if you save business and there's no one to buy the products, then you haven't really done anything much, right? Countries that have done better under crisis moments are the ones that go hard, go early, go household.
Black Sash says the Department of Social Development should try to implement a form of universal income to mitigate the negative financial effects of the coronavirus pandemic.
Universal basic income grants are critical for many reasons. One, they boost the domestic economy because poor people have a higher marginal propensity to spend on the domestic economy. But also two, it has huge gender equity gains, right? Because it covers women, and we know in South Africa that black women have the highest unemployment rate in South Africa. It also covers women who are doing unpaid care work, who are not part of those work structures, who choose actually to do that provisioning work. So Universal Basic Income Grant has huge potential to also bring people out of poverty.
How do governments finance their expenditure? They do this through taxes, borrowing, and with some income from property. One of the ways that governments borrow money is through bonds, which give investors an opportunity to loan an amount to a government in return for an agreed rate of interest.
Now, the Reserve Bank could be one of the instruments that purchases these bonds. Now, if it purchases a lot of bonds, it does two things. One, it gives government the resources with which to deal with all the urgent issues that it is faced with. Sorting out the state-owned enterprises, providing decent medical care, upgrading the hospitals, and all of those type of things. But it also would help by lowering the interest rate of these bonds.
The private sector banks could do even more than the Reserve Bank could do. They should stop charging high interest rates to the poorest households, to the smallest businesses. It's a contradiction. The poorer you are, the higher the interest rate they charge you. Actually, it should be the opposite way around.
One of the things that we ought to be targeting is this huge amount of money that big businesses put in the banks. They don't use for investment purposes. It just sits idly there, earning an interest. We should be saying, let's put a tax on that. And from that tax, we would be able then to mobilize significant amount of resources to do all the things that we need to do to protect people's health and livelihoods.
Poverty, unemployment, inequality have meant that the working class and the poor continue to pay for an economic crisis not of their making. Healthcare for the rich and hell for the poor.
For a just recovery from COVID, South Africa needs to plan for the other big threat that we face, the climate crisis. There is talk of a just energy transition that will protect workers by creating many new jobs as we move away from coal, gas, and oil. So what are the factors to consider as the country embarks on a just recovery process?
The best way to drive an industrialization program to create tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs is a renewables-led industrialization program to make the stuff that is needed for this massive infrastructure we have to build.
Let us advance a high-impact industrial policy, and let us measure such high-impact industrial policy with two outcomes. One, it must develop, expand, and diversify national production. Two, it must create employment and therefore reduce unemployment.
How do we include workers' voices in this climate justice conversation? Like, it should be about, we are trying to achieve a green new economy in these ways to ensure that those people who are in that sector get jobs or packages or something as we move towards this new economy.
To ensure this just transition, we need vital sectors of the economy in our hands. The mines, the banks, energy and land are key.
We need those banks so that we don't live under their yoke anymore. We can take charge of them. We need the land, not for the elites who are going to replace the white with the black. No, we want the land in the hands of the working families, of the communities. And to use their benefits and their so-called profits for the benefit of the people as a whole. You know, it's a major demand that has been abandoned by the ANC.
The Freedom Charter says the state will redistribute land to those who work it and will assist those who work the land with seeds, implements and equipment, and it will advance technical training.
We want them to drive the food sovereignty, our independence, using our land and driving our independence using our food resources in the country.
South Africa in our conversation are talking about the difference between life and death on a day-to-day basis. It's also, food sovereignty is also linked to the ability to produce food that is meaningful to us. That's very important.
We've lost more than 3 million jobs. Abantu basemakhaya balambile. We want a recovery plan which favors the poor, which favors the working class.
A just and green recovery plan won't just land on our laps. It's going to require collective action.
If we do not go on a series of general strikes to force the government to engage with the issue of the Green Deal and just transition, the government will do what it does best, which is to listen to the interest of white monopoly capital and white interest, and will sideline our interest. 24th of February is going to be absolutely critical to send out a message that says we have seen enough, we have heard enough, we are now hard for. We want that unity.